My apologies, this is going to be a longer video. It's about factoring and how you approach it based on your number of terms. So just real quickly, if you have 4 terms, you're going to approach it with a technique called factor by grouping most of the time. If you have 3 terms, you're going to use a technique called the AC method. There's 2 types that you'll deal with when you're dealing with 2 terms, and one is a difference of squares. We can't do a sum of squares because the middle term, when you're factoring, is dropped out, and so it's impossible to get the signs to work out. Also, with 2 terms, you could have a sum of cubes, or you could have a difference of cubes, and so I have 2 examples there. So when you're dealing with factoring by grouping, you generally split it into 2 groups of 2. You sometimes see like 6 terms and you break it up into 2 groups of 3. There are times when you'll do a group of 1 and 3. It's a little weird, but most of the time it's 2 and 2. And then you look for what is the greatest common factor in the first pair and ignore what's over here. So you almost just cover it up and you go, all right, what's in common? Well, an A is in common, and then you're left with B plus 1. And then the sign of what you factor out of here, about 95% of the time is that sign. Once in a while, it's not. So you have to make sure that this label here has sign agreement over there, and if they don't, that's how you know you've got to change the sign on your factoring. Well, these are all positive, and so I'm going to pull out a positive C, and that's going to leave me with a B plus 1. Now, these 2 labels match, and I want you to think about the Chiquita banana labels. You pull off the 2 labels and they exactly match, and you can put them on top of each other and lay them down, and I want you to envision that as being just all one label now. So there's the B plus 1. Those 2 get pulled out and set there. And then you have the leftovers. The leftover is A, and the other leftover is plus C. And so you've just done factor by grouping. Now, if you have 3 terms, your first step, and the reason that it is called the AC method is because you take the value of the A, which is the 3, and you multiply it by the value of the C. You have to be aware of the signs and so forth, but 3 times 1 is 3, so you write it over here. And then you have factor pairs, so you'd have 3 and 1 and negative 3 and negative 1. Well, one of these factor pairs adds up to B. Well, the 3 plus 1 does. And so you do this rewrite of this middle term, and so it looks like this. 3x squared plus 3x plus 1x plus 1. Because 3x plus 1x adds up to 4x. And basically what you've done is now you've tricked a 3-termed polynomial to look like a 4-termed polynomial, and you proceed by doing factor by grouping. So we dot this little line right here, and we say, all right, what's in common with the 3x squared and the positive 3x? Well, you have a 3x. And that's going to leave you with an x plus 1. Now, what's in common in these 2? Well, just a positive 1. Now, that'll leave you with an x plus 1. And if you'll notice, the banana labels match. So you've got x plus 1, and what's left over is that 3x and that plus 1. Okay. Now, difference of squares. So I have x squared minus 9. Remember I said you can't have sum of squares. The reason is that in order to generate a negative, you need a positive and you need a negative. If you have a negative and a negative, that term becomes a positive, and you generate a middle term. If you do a positive and a positive, that's a positive, and you generate a middle term. So you ask yourself, what's the square root of x squared? It's x. And so you put them there and there. And what's the square root of 9? It's 3 and 3. And so you actually are just going to multiply that out to check it. So x times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. 3 times x is a positive 3x. And those eliminate. A positive 3 times a negative 3 gives me my negative 9. So that has been factored. All right, a little bit more challenging one, 25y to the 4th minus 9. Well, square root of 25 is 5. The square root of y to the 4th is y squared. We know we need a plus and we know we need a minus. And so we have 5y squared there as well. And then the 9 breaks down to a 3 and a 3. Now, if the 5 and the 3 had square roots, we could do another difference of squares here. But 5 doesn't have a square root. That's nice, nor does 3. If you get into algebra, or college, my apologies, if you get into calculus, they might do something funny where they would write it like this, 5y squared plus 3, and then you can actually split that and go, all right, well, that's the square root of 5y minus the square root of 3, and that's the square root of 5y plus the square root of 3. There's sometimes things like that happen, but in general, we tend to stop there. Okay, and now it's the difference of cubes and the sum of cubes. And the process is followed the same. So let's just begin with the first example where we have 27 minus x cubed. And what I want you to think about is 27, that was my son again, my apologies. But 27 is really 3 cubed. And the x cubed is x cubed. So in the first set of parentheses, you're going to do what I call Batman mask or Robin mask. So you circle the stuff that doesn't have the cubes. It's just the 3 minus x, and that's what goes in here. And then you get this thing, you realize that you need to use it 3 times. But you can only ever tap this twice. So the phrase I use is I call it tap, tap. So I go tap, tap. Well, that's 3 times 3. Here's 3 squared. Then I've used 2 of the taps, so I'm going to go tap, tap, and that's the middle. That's 3x. And then I've used 1 of the taps here, so I have tap, tap, so that's x squared. And that is factored. So now we've got x cubed plus 8. Well, x cubed is x cubed, and I'm going to write it as 2 to the 3rd power. This part here is the Batman mask. So I've got x plus 2, and I put 3 little dash marks down below, and then I put 3 little dash marks down below there. Now I use 2 of the dash marks, tap, tap. So that's x squared. Now I use 2 more of the dash marks, tap, tap. So that's 2x. And then I go tap, tap. Well, 2 squared is 4. Now I didn't bring this up here. This sign and this sign never match. And this one's always positive. So if this sign here and this sign can never match, this one must be a negative. And then this one is a positive. And that's how to do difference of cubes.